I'll finish you. The other Pinkie sweated out more blood as she gripped the butcher's knife as best she could with a hoof, dragging it along the ground as she began to walk towards Pinkie. Pinkie took in sharp breaths of air as she concentrated on the vile pink mare before her. The other Pinkie began to pick up the pace before going out into a full-on run straight for Pinkie. She seemed groggy but determined to bring that knife down into Pinkie's flesh. Pinkie had aimed the uninjured half of her body at the other Pinkie, bringing her hind hoof up once more. The butcher's knife was raised into the air, sparks flying as it had scraped along the ground. The frantic rush of the other Pinkie was closing in, ready to strike down. For a moment, everything seemed to hold still, right on the edge of death. Two forces that never should have met collided. There was silence for a moment, before the soft sound of a thud, a body hitting the ground. Pinkie's eyes were half open, in a mixed state of daze and pain. She could barely register the pain of the butcher's knife that was buried in her back. The other Pinkie pulled, feeling the knife stuck in her back, but after a few yanks it pulled free. The other Pinkie, despite bleeding from the mouth, couldn't help but have a broad smile on her face. She began to laugh as her victim laid there. She raised the knife and brought it down with tremendous force on her leg. She slammed the knife down into the same spot, again and again, blood splattering everywhere as she worked. All Pinkie could hear was the dull thuds of the knife as it struck her body. She couldn't move or even scream. She could only lay there as blood poured from her body. The other Pinkie was moving, but it barely registered. The distant thuds of the knife escaped her. She couldn't feel her body anymore, and her mind was fading away. The dull, rhythmic sounds of the thuds seemed to lull her to sleep. "Oh, she's gone already?" Pinkie pouted as she looked at the dismembered body before her. After she had finished cutting off her limbs, she had gone and cleaned up her mouth. She was missing a lot of teeth, but she could talk again. "Phooey, she fought too much. I killed her before I had a chance to play." She let out a sigh of disappointment. "Oh well, I'm sure I can still have all sorts of fun with what I do have left." She chuckled, bouncing a little as she thought to herself. "I'll make sure she gets put to good use. After all, there's no point in just letting her die without doing something." She laughed as she thought about all the things she could do with the body. She grabbed the scalpel carefully as she walked over to the body. She carefully placed the knife against the body, about to slice off the cutie mark for her to add to her dress. The perfect accessory. The scalpel slipped from a hoof. "Huh?" she said, looking at the scalpel oddly. "I've never been clumsy about my tools before," she said as she reached down to grab the scalpel again. However, it slipped right through her grip. She swiped at it several times in rapid succession, but it continued to hold no grip. "What in the name of all things sweet and sugary is going on here?" she asked, confused as she looked at her hoof. She could partially see through it. "Oh, silly me," she laughed. "I'm disappearing." She watched with a smile as more of her leg began to fade away. Her hoof was missing. She lifted her leg up as she watched the vanishing act reach her body. "I guess it's time for me to head on out," she laughed to herself. "This world was a lot of fun. I can't wait to see where I'm being taken now." She smiled as her body began to disappear. Her entire being soon vanished from the realm. Twilight backed up, shaking her groggy head. She rubbed her forehead, not sure exactly what had just happened, though she could tell it had only been a few minutes. She looked up and saw her friend Pinkie Pie sitting there with her eyes closed. "Pinkie Pie? Are you all right?" Twilight asked, looking at her friend. Slowly, Pinkie's eyes opened. She blinked once or twice, looking at her friend Twilight, then up and around at the library. She then looked down at her body. It took a moment, but very slowly, a smile began to appear on her face. "Pinkie Pie?" Twilight asked again. Pinkie closed her eyes as she began to shake. The smile began to wobble as she felt the surge of emotions flowing through her body. "Oh my gosh!" Pinkie Pie cried out suddenly, jumping into the air as her hair burst out into its usual frizz, her coat going back to its bright color. She bounced around the room excitedly. Oh my gosh, Twilight, this is so much better!" She laughed as she bounced giddily around Twilight's house. "Really? The mind delve worked?" Twilight said, smiling at her friend, who seemed to be back to her old self. Oh, did it ever! She said, stopping short of her friend, the biggest smile on her face. Thank you, Twilight! Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you! She gave her unicorn a mighty squeezing hug. Twilight couldn't help but let out a chuckle. Well, I'm glad I could help and that you're feeling better. Twilight smiled happily. Oh, I feel great! I feel even better than I did before when I was happy. She let out a sigh of content. So this calls for only one thing. She raised her legs in the air. A party! And I'm going to invite every pony in Ponyville! She cheered as she hopped out of Twilight's house to quickly get the preparations going. Well, seeing her happy again certainly makes up for seeing the images that were in her head. Twilight chuckled, rubbing her head, thankful to have been helpful to her friend. Pinkie Pie bounced towards Sugar Cube Corner, overfilled with joy. Wow! I really feel like I've got a new lease on life! She giggled to herself as she looked around, seeing all the happy ponies of Ponyville going about their day. She knew every pony in Ponyville, after all, and they were all so happy. She was happy they were, and she was so happy that she could help bring that happiness to them. But there's really so many of them here, she said, remembering just how many ponies lived there. And I certainly don't want to seem like I'm giving any pony the special treatment. She smiled as she thought to herself. Oh, I know! I'll make a number system. That way I can pick ponies without playing favorites. She chuckled happily to herself. I can't pick ponies too often, though. Otherwise it'll seem suspicious that they start disappearing. She had a big smile on her face. Oh, but I just can't wait. It's going to take forever to get my dress sewn together again, but getting to play with all the ponies is going to be so much fun. And of course, I can't forget to make my super duper wonderfully fantastic special cupcakes while I'm at it. Pinkie Pie bounced merrily to set up the party at Sugar Cube Corner. Bad end. Ending. It's time to get baking. Unlock condition. Lose to Pinkie Pie.